I've been hearing that a lot of people are exhausted right now, and it isn't because they're doing too much. This tired feels different. And before you tell yourself you need a better routine, a better mindset, or more discipline, take a pause. Because sometimes the problem isn't effort, it's timing. It doesn't lift after a good night's sleep, and it doesn't disappear after a day off. It lingers even when life looks fine on paper. And if you've been wondering why you still feel heavy, even though nothing's technically wrong, I want to sit with that today. Because there's a kind of exhaustion that shows up right before relief. So stop and take a breath with me. Hi, loves. Welcome back to Amy's View Unscripted. I'm Amy, and this is Life in Motion, where we connect with intention and grow with purpose, moving the whole world forward by becoming who we're meant to be. But today we're talking about energy, capacity, and the kind of exhaustion that doesn't respond to productivity hacks or better schedules. The kind that asks to be understood, not fixed. I've been hearing this everywhere lately, from friends, from family, even colleagues. People are tired, even the ones doing all the right things, eating better, setting boundaries, resting more than they used to. And still, there's this underlying drag, a sense of slowness and heaviness that doesn't have a neat explanation. And this tired doesn't feel frantic, it doesn't feel chaotic, it feels dense, like wading through water instead of walking on solid ground. And when we don't have the language for that, we tend to blame ourselves. We assume that we lost motivation. We assume that we've done something wrong. And we assume we should be further along by now. But what if this isn't a failure of effort? What if it's a phase of transition? Even if you look to the natural world right now, there's a shift happening. Depending on where you live, trees are bare, fields are resting, growth has slowed or gone underground. Nothing in nature looks rushed in this season. There's no urgency to replace what was shed, no panic about appearances, no pressure to perform. Energy pulls inward on purpose. And what's interesting is that nature doesn't interpret this as decline. It understands it as preparation. Here's something that we don't talk about enough. Letting go costs energy. We talk a lot about the courage that it takes to hold on, but we don't talk enough about the strength that it takes to release, especially when you're releasing something that once kept you safe. Even when you're letting go of something that weighed you down, even when the release is healthy, even when you know that it's time, there's effort involved in loosening your grip. Think about carrying a heavy bag for a long time. The moment you set it down, your arms don't instantly feel strong again. They ache. They have to adjust, and then they recalibrate. That ache doesn't mean that the bag should have stayed. It means that your body is adapting to a new reality. And the same thing happens emotionally. It's a process that rest can't always fix. And I think this is where a lot of people get confused. Because this phase doesn't look productive. It doesn't look impressive. And it doesn't get applause. Which is exactly why so many people abandon themselves right here. They rest and expect immediate relief. And when it doesn't come, They just push harder, or judge themselves, or assume they're doing rest wrong. But rest isn't always the answer to transition fatigue, because this kind of exhaustion isn't depletion alone. It's like an energetic reorganization. Your system is learning a new rhythm. Your nervous system is updating its map. And your energy is being redirected away from old patterns. That process takes time. Just like winter soil regenerates beneath the surface before anything green appears, winter is misunderstood. From the outside, it looks empty, still, and unproductive. But beneath frozen ground, roots strengthen, microorganisms rebalance, soil repairs itself. Life hasn't stopped, it has changed direction. There's an inward intelligence at work. And when humans try to override that rhythm, when we demand constant output, exhaustion follows. Not because we're weak, but because we're misaligned. Personally, I have felt this deeply. There have been moments where I look at my life and think, I'm finally living more honestly, so why do I feel so tired? I wasn't overextended. I wasn't inserting myself into spaces that drained me. I was actually doing less. And yet, my energy felt lower. And what I eventually understood was this: honesty requires integration. When you stop abandoning yourself, your body has to catch up. When you stop tolerating what you once endured, your system recalibrates. And when you release survival patterns, there's a brief period where the absence feels heavy. Not because you want them back, but because they shaped your rhythm for so long. This is the phase that people don't talk about. The part where you're no longer who you were, but you're still becoming who you're growing into. The middle ground. It's slower here, quieter. And because it doesn't look impressive, people assume that they're stuck, but they're not. They're adjusting. Just like a tree after shedding leaves doesn't rush to bloom again. I think a helpful way to think about this is reallocation. Because energy doesn't disappear. It just moves. And when you stop feeding certain dynamics, health, or identities, energy withdraws from those places. And at first, that can feel like loss. But what's really happening is space being created. Space for steadier movement. Space for clarity. Space for relief. And productivity culture struggles with this. We live in a world that rewards visible effort. Doing, producing, proving. Stillness makes people uncomfortable. Stillness threatens systems that profit from your exhaustion. So if slowing down feels rebellious, that is not an accident. But stillness is often where the deepest shifts occur. When you are no longer distracted by constant output, you begin to notice what your body has been signaling all along. And that awareness can feel tiring at first, because awareness asks for presence. But this is not the moment to force yourself into high performance. This is a moment for honesty. Ask yourself, what drains me faster than it used to? What feels heavier than it should? Where am I pushing out of habit rather than alignment? Support right now looks simple: fewer commitments, more margin, gentler mornings. Not because you are incapable, but because you're reorganizing. Choose nourishment over optimization. That might mean eating for comfort and stability, choosing movement that soothes rather than challenges, and letting quiet moments just exist rather than filling them. Give yourself permission to move slower. There is no moral value attached to speed. Moving slower during transition isn't laziness, it's wisdom. Because nature doesn't apologize for its cycles, so why should you have to? As you're allowing yourself to rest before relief, just remember, relief doesn't typically announce itself as it arrives. And let me say this clearly, because someone needs to hear it. You don't need to earn relief by suffering longer. It arrives subtly. One day, you notice your breath feels steadier. And then another day, you realize that something that used to weigh on you just isn't there anymore. Decisions feel simpler, and even movement feels easier. Your energy returns a little differently. It may feel less frantic, less scattered, and more grounded. Like spring emerging from soil that has been quietly preparing all along. If you take nothing else from this episode, take this with you. Exhaustion isn't always a warning sign. Sometimes it's a threshold, a moment where your body is releasing what your life no longer needs. A moment where your energy is reorganizing itself around truth. And nature doesn't rush this part. It trusts what's happening beneath the surface. And you're allowed to trust that too. Relief doesn't come from forcing yourself forward. It comes from letting yourself land. And when it arrives, it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like space, like steadier breath, like realizing you're no longer carrying what once weighed you down. So if you've been feeling transitional exhaustion, trust yourself, trust the process, because relief is right around the corner. If this episode resonated with you, please give this video a like. It really helps this space reach the people who need it. And as always, I would love to hear from you, so please leave me a comment and tell me where you're feeling tired. No fixing, no explaining. And then tell me one thing you're grateful you no longer have to carry. Or one way you're giving yourself permission to move a little slower right now. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our future conversations. But thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And take care of yourself in this season. And I'll see you soon.